How is it going, everyone? I hope you guys are having a great day. So in this video, I just wanted to kind of talk about something that kind of irritated me. If you're not familiar with the tech scene on Twitter, it's a scene that you should probably be part of if you want to get little tips and tricks about programming or web development and just learn more from experienced developers. But with that being said, there's one thing I want to warn you about, and that is just blindly following advice that you might read on Twitter or other social media accounts that try to kind of give you tips of what you should do and not do in programming. So like, what am I actually talking about? Well, I was reading through Twitter and then someone posted something. I'm not actually gonna like go into details of who posted it, but someone posted a little, like a really well designed PNG, like a picture of a do and don't in JavaScript, right? So if you're a beginner and you see this picture and you see how many followers this person has, you'll probably be like, oh man, this guy probably has great advice because he has a lot of followers and his picture looks really good. But when you actually inspect the advice that he was giving, this is basically what it boils down to. So if you are familiar with the delete keyword in JavaScript, the argument was that you should not use the delete keyword. So you might be familiar with this, like you make an object that has a property called age, and then let's say for some reason you need to delete that property. Well, you can do it by doing delete and then the object dot property, right? Simple enough. When you print this out, it's going to print out person with only the name of Bob. So his picture, his beautifully crafted picture, said that instead of doing that, what you should do in your code is something like this. So this is basically doing the REST operator in ES6, where you can kind of pick apart objects that you want out of the person object. So in this case, you can grab the age and then also combine all the other properties omitting age inside another variable, I guess. So in this case, you have an object called person without age, and you can go ahead and print that out. And if you run it, you get the exact same output. Now, the issue I have with people who just give advice like this is that there was no why. He didn't explain why you should do this. It was just an opinion that was out there that said, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do. And what I want to warn you all is don't just blindly follow people's advice unless they give you a reasoning behind why they advise that. All right, so I want to first of all break this down. The advice isn't bad. I understand where he's coming from. So basically, when you do mutations on JavaScript objects, it can kind of set up your program for bugs in the future, right? So if you have an object that you're passing around into function, that reference could potentially be changed, right? People could add on properties to that person object, or people could delete properties. So the issue is it might have the age in one function, but 13 functions down the tree of function calls, age might get deleted. And it's really hard to pinpoint where it got deleted and what is causing this bug where a property is just magically gone now. And so that's not to say that mutations are necessarily bad, but you need to make sure they have some type of unit testing around your code to make sure that issues like that don't happen. Or just be cognizant. If you're going to use the delete keyword, make sure there's a really good intent as to why you're using it. Now for the do, this approach is pretty cool. I mean, it basically creates a shallow copy of the person object and omits the age property. Now the only issue with this is now you have an age variable that's sitting around, and if you use something like ESLint, it's going to highlight this and say, hey, you have an unused variable. So that's kind of a con in my opinion, because then you have just a variable sitting around, and it could be kind of confusing because you're like, okay, why is there an age variable here? It's not used, right? So what I would recommend instead is maybe you can bring in like a Lodash, where you could basically do like a Lodash.omit. You pass in the object, you pass in the property, and that should return you a shallow copy of the object without the age property. By the way, my green screen is probably a little bit messed up because I'm wearing a green shirt, so I had to find like a good medium where it didn't just make me go all see-through. But anyway, so the recommendation I think you should do instead is bring in Lodash and use their omit function, where you can pass in an object and omit properties from that object, and that'll return you a shallow clone. Another approach, which I think is better than this, is you could basically just do a splat operator, I think this was called, or I forget what it's called. Basically, you could do this. So do a shallow clone of the person object, and then you could just, if you wanted to, you could just go ahead and just delete the age off of that. So I could say delete person without age, age. Okay, so that is another potential solution. What I'm getting at and what irritates me is that people post stuff online, but then they don't actually explain why you should do stuff. And what makes it worse, if you actually read through the comments, there's like a ton of people asking why, like why should you do this? There's a ton of people saying that this is bad advice. There's no reason why you need to do this. This is the other approach is just extra complexity, you know? Right, this approach is just like extra complexity. You have an age variable sitting around that's not used, and all these people have good responses, and the person on Twitter doesn't respond to any of the comments. He literally just posts some tip. Tons of people are confused about it or complaining about it or asking why. He doesn't respond to the comments. So I just want to say, be careful who you follow on tech Twitter. Sometimes these people post great advice and other times they post questionable advice. What makes it worse is they don't follow through with their community and kind of give responses as to why. But I do have one last example, which also, like, I don't even know I'm on tech Twitter. I don't even like Twitter. So someone else, this is a completely different person, posted a tweet that had, like, you know, the top 6 ways to kind of reduce your complexity or dry up your code. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. But the first thing in the bullet point was make sure your functions are no more than like 6 lines of code. Again, they don't explain why. They just say make sure your function calls, make sure your function definitions are like between 6 to 10 lines of code. And I'll just give it to you straight. I've never worked on a single project in my life where a function can actually be that short. Maybe you might have a couple of them, but what ends up happening is that there's always these like top level controller functions that have a ton of code in them. Whether that's like your JSX component, you're using React, you're gonna have functions that have a lot of lines of code in it. Now, with his suggestion, if you just follow it blindly, what you basically need to do is take your function and split it up into smaller functions, right? So you have a bunch of little private functions that are kind of making up the core logic of that large function. Now that has some pros and it has some cons. The pros are, yeah, your function is smaller, it's a little bit easier to understand. The main con, in my opinion, is now you have to keep jumping back and forth in between all these functions to understand the high level overview of how stuff works, right? And again, this isn't bad advice. These people are giving out good advice, but they're not explaining why. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, when people just get on tech Twitter or get on YouTube and just say that you should do stuff a certain way, and they don't back it up with any type of evidence. They don't back it up with reasoning. They don't explain why you should do it. And if you're a beginner, you might just eat that stuff up like candy, right? You might just be like, oh, this guy is so good, let's just listen to everything he says. Like, these are the best practices, let's just follow them blindly. But you need to think beyond that. You need to actually question these people. You need to do the research, figure out why you should do it this way. What benefits do I get? What cons do I get? Why is the old way not good? Why is this way not good? Why are mutations bad and immutable code good? Now, it's just stuff like that. So at this point, I'm just rambling. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you've read comments and tips and tricks on tech Twitter or just YouTube where people just say to do something and you just follow it blindly, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on it. So leave me a comment below. And if you're new to my channel, just be sure to click that subscribe button, because I'm going to have videos like this in the future where I just talk about some random stuff. And then lastly, give me a thumbs up, because it really helps my channel grow with the YouTube algorithm. All right, y'all. Happy coding. Have a good day.